Libra, God didn't take this person out of your life without a reason. The truth you need to hear. Libra, you spent months, maybe years, trying to understand what you did wrong. You reviewed conversations, you reviewed silences. You wondered if it was due to excessive caution or a lack thereof. And in the midst of this silent investigation, a question remained stuck in your throat, too afraid to be asked aloud. What if this departure never had anything to do with you being wrong, but with you being about to become someone else? Those born under the sign of Libra know how to do one thing better than almost anyone else: keep everything afloat. The conversation standing, the bond standing, the table set, the apparent peace. It's a rare, almost invisible talent, this ability to hold the balance of a relationship on one's shoulders without letting the weight show. But there's a question most Librans never ask themselves, because it hurts too much to think about in the morning. How many times have you held up a bridge that should have already collapsed? God, the universe, life, call it what you will, doesn't remove a person from your path by chance. There's a logic there, silent, almost geometric, that Libra recognizes before any other sign, because Libra is obsessed with balance. And that's precisely why this departure hurts so much, because it breaks a scale that you spent your whole life trying to keep perfectly balanced. But perhaps the problem was never that the scale broke. Perhaps the problem is that you thought balance meant both ends were still, motionless, never oscillating. And nobody told you that true balance isn't that. True balance is constant movement, constant adjustment, small dips and small corrections. A perfectly still scale is in fact a broken scale. So why do you keep reliving that outing as if it were your fault? There's a pattern within Libra that few name, because it doesn't seem like a flaw. It seems like care. It's the compulsion to keep everything pleasant, everything comfortable, everything in visible harmony, even when something inside is already screaming that it's not right. Libra learned very early on that disagreeing has a cost, that asking for what you need has a cost, that existing whole, without editing your own rough edges, can push away the people you most want close. And that's where the most silent and most expensive habit of a Libra's entire life is born, the constant editing of oneself to fit within the peace of others. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've edited out your own desires just to avoid throwing a conversation off balance? This isn't weakness. It's an emotional survival strategy learned at some point when disagreeing seemed more dangerous than fading away. And it worked. For a while. It kept relationships alive that perhaps shouldn't even have been alive. It kept people around who, deep down, drained more than they gave back. Because for Libra, an unstable bond is almost unbearable. It hurts more to be silent in an empty room than in a room full of people who only suck you dry. And it is precisely here that the most uncomfortable paradox of this whole story lies. The person God took away may have been, without you realizing it, the greatest test of your own balance. Not because they were bad, not because they were good, but because, alongside them, you could no longer maintain the artificial equilibrium you had been sustaining for so long. What if this person's departure wasn't a punishment, but the only way for you to finally put the weight on the ground and feel, for the first time, what truly weighed you down? Maybe you don't have the answer to that yet. That's okay. This question doesn't require haste. It requires space. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try to keep everything in harmony around you, there's a persistent exhaustion, as if part of your energy is always focused on balancing others, and there's never enough left to balance yourself? What if what you call excessive care or difficulty saying no is actually an invitation to see your own harmony from a new perspective? Many Librans believe that simply yielding a little more, understanding a little more, waiting a little longer, is enough. But what if real change begins when you understand the invisible laws that govern this pattern, those that explain why certain people drain your energy even when you do everything right? It was with this type of question in mind that the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help Each Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, was born. It doesn't promise miracles. It brings together interpretations and practical exercises for you to recognize these patterns of energy drain, understand the role of others' envy in this silent depletion, and recover a balance that is yours, not a balance built solely to please those around you. If anything said so far resonated with you, it might be worth taking a look. The material is available in the first pinned comment for anyone who wants to delve deeper into this perspective. And before we continue, leave a thought in the comments. When was the last time you gave up on your feelings just to maintain a harmony that deep down was no longer true? There's a detail that goes unnoticed in the life of almost every Libra. Harmony has a price, and that price is almost never paid up front. It's paid in installments. A peace in every swallowed silence. A peace in every "it's okay" said when it's not okay. A peace in every time you agreed just to avoid seeing the other person's face change. And the bill for this installment doesn't arrive in the form of a payment slip. It arrives in the form of unexplained exhaustion, a desire to disappear on any given Sunday, a tiredness that rest doesn't solve. Imagine a bank account that only has withdrawals, never deposits. That's basically what happens when someone spends their entire life buying other people's peace with their own energy. At some point, the balance runs out. And the worst part is, those who live like this are usually the last to realize it because they're so trained in taking care of other people's well-being that they've forgotten to do the same balancing act within themselves. Why is it that no one ever taught you how to do this internal assessment? The answer begins long before adulthood. At some point, a small, almost forgotten one, Libra learned that love and approval came in the same package as agreement. That it was safer to be the easy person, the person who didn't cause trouble, than to be the whole person, with opinions, with limits, with a no on the tip of their tongue. And this learning, so ancient that it seems part of their personality, is actually just a protective mechanism, a mechanism that worked so well that it became a prison. And this is where the scales begin to crack in a way that no one sees from the outside. Because on the outside, Libra continues smiling, continues mediating, continues being that port where everyone docks without asking if the port also needs rest. Inside, something is becoming heavier and heavier, more silent, more like an anger that no one allowed to exist. And perhaps it is precisely this unauthorized anger that is the real explanation for so many departures that you called losses, when in fact they were a necessary cut. Some people are drawn to Libra precisely because of their ability to balance everything. And they use this, without even realizing it, as an invitation to never have to balance things alone. This specific kind of strain, bearing the emotional weight of someone who only knows how to drain, is what the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help This Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, addresses. It offers insights into how to recognize within one's own relationships when someone's admiration has become a burden disguised as closeness, and how to reclaim inner space without guilt. It's not a magic formula. It's an invitation to look at things from a different angle. Anyone who wants to delve deeper can find the material in the first pinned comment. There's a recurring scene with slight variations in the life of practically every Libra. The moment when disagreeing would be the right thing to do and silence wins again. Not out of cowardice, out of instant, almost automatic emotional calculation, weighing in milliseconds the cost of telling the truth against the cost of keeping everything as it is. And almost always, keeping everything as it is seems cheaper. It seems, because this calculation forgets to account for one thing, The interest that the unspoken truth exacts later in the form of resentment that corrodes from within without warning. Imagine someone holding a glass filled to the brim, walking through an entire house, attentive to every step, every door, every person they might bump into. That's the permanent state of someone who lives managing the emotional climate of others. A state of constant alert disguised as kindness. And the problem isn't being kind. The problem is when kindness becomes survival, not a choice. Why does telling the truth hurt so much more in Libra than swallowing it for years? Because for Libra, conflict has never been just disagreement. Deep down, conflict has learned to mean abandonment, and no one consciously chooses to risk abandonment just to say what they feel. So the strategy becomes something else. Soften, postpone, reformulate until the original truth becomes so diluted that it loses any power to change anything. And it is precisely at this point that the most painful contradiction of this whole story lies. Those who fear conflict the most are usually those who carry it most silently, within their own hearts, alone, without anyone ever knowing the price paid for that apparent peace. And what if the person God took from your life was precisely the one who made you swallow your own truth the most? Not because they were bad, but because alongside them, disagreeing always seemed too impossible. Helping someone who only knows how to ask, without ever asking what you also need, has a name that few use: disappearing with applause. You slowly disappear, smiling, being praised for it, for your patience, your sweetness, your ability to endure. And the more you are praised for enduring, the harder it becomes to admit, even to yourself, that it's no longer love, but a routine of exhaustion. It is precisely this cycle, giving until you disappear, and being recognized precisely for what drains you, that the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe, that help the zodiac sign, Overcome Spiritual Envy, helps to name. It talks about how to identify when someone else's admiration turns into silent demands, and how to rebuild boundaries without becoming a cold person, which is what Libra fears more than almost anything. For those who want to better understand this dynamic, the link is in the first pinned comment. There's an uncomfortable question that almost no Libra allows themselves to ask about someone who has left their life. What did that person reflect in me that I didn't yet have the courage to face alone? Because every relationship that demands too much from one side tends to function as a mirror, not of the other person, but of a part of you that didn't yet know how to say enough. The irritation you felt and hid, the tiredness you disguised as infinite patience, the desire to be heard that you traded for being useful. Imagine a foggy mirror, like the ones in bathrooms after a hot shower. You know your image is there, but you can only see outlines, incomplete shapes. That's how Libra usually perceives its own pain within an unbalanced relationship. It knows it exists, feels its weight, but rarely manages to clearly name exactly what is hurting. And while the mirror remains foggy, the pattern repeats itself. With another person, another context, the same imbalance disguised as coincidence. But perhaps it's no coincidence at all. Perhaps it's a pattern repeating itself until someone, yourself, decides to break the cycle instead of just changing the characters. And the most curious thing is that the more someone publicly admires your balanced way of dealing with everything, the harder it becomes to ask for help when that balance begins to crumble inside. The admiration of others unintentionally becomes a silent demand. Continue being that serene person, even when you are no longer capable. This type of pattern, repeating the same imbalance with different faces, sustained by others' expectations that you will always be able to cope, is what the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe that help your zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy, addresses. It proposes a path to recognizing these cycles before they repeat themselves, and to understanding the role that the energy of comparison and demands from others plays in this wear and tear. It's not about blaming those who have already left your life. It's about stopping repeating with the next person what already hurt too much last time. The complete material is in the first pinned comment, for anyone who feels that this is the right time to look at this pattern head-on. Now let's go back to that person, the one who left, the one you're still trying to understand, even without admitting it out loud. There's one version of the story where she was just a loss, and there's another version, quieter, harder to accept, where she was a mirror that stayed in front of you for too long, reflecting an imbalance that was no longer sustainable, neither for her nor especially for you. Libra has an almost sacred relationship with the idea of justice, and perhaps that's the missing piece. There is no possible justice in a relationship where only one side adjusts, yields, balances. That's not harmony. It's a sacrifice disguised as harmony, and every time Libra confuses one with the other, a real part of themselves is left out of their own life, waiting to be invited back. The person who left may have unknowingly done the hardest job of all, forcing you to discover where genuine care ends and where the habit of self-effacement begins. Not because they wanted to hurt you, often not even because they were a bad person, simply because by their side the imbalance became too great to fit within any polite silence. What if instead of asking why she left, you started asking what was left of you after she left? Because it's precisely in that empty, uncomfortable space without ready answers that the part of you that never had permission to exist without apologizing resides. There's an image that helps to understand this better. Imagine an old-fashioned scale, like the ones you find at markets, with two metal plates hanging from chains. When one of the plates carries too much weight, the other rises into the air, empty, almost useless, just swaying along with it. From a distance, someone might even find the movement beautiful. Up close, it's just imbalance disguised as a dance. And for a long time, perhaps you were precisely that empty plate, rising, falling, always dependent on the weight on the other side, never carrying anything that was truly yours. What nobody told you is that a scale only truly works when both sides are allowed to think, not always weighing equally. That would be too shallow, too naive for real life. But despite being true, it allows for the right to complain, to disagree, to get tired, to say no without feeling like a worse person for it. And it is precisely this permission that Libra tends to give to others with almost automatic generosity and deny to themselves with the same automaticity. Perhaps the greatest silent revolution a Libra can make isn't learning to better balance the world around them. Perhaps it's learning that they too have weight, that they too can occupy space without constantly asking permission, that disagreeing isn't synonymous with war, and that telling their own truth, even trembling, even fearing the silence that might follow, is the only real way to stop repeating the same story with different faces. What if God or life or whatever organizes these invisible cycles remove that person from your path precisely to restore you to your own weight? Not to punish you, not to leave you alone, but to remind you that a scale without both plates active is not balance, it's absence, and you weren't born to be absent from your own life. Perhaps this is the simplest and hardest truth to accept. You didn't lose that person because you weren't enough. You lost them, or they drifted away because a part of you was ready to stop negating yourself. And every part ready to be born needs, first, something old to leave the scene. There is something profoundly beautiful in this, even if it hurts. Libra spends its life seeking harmony outside itself, in the right words, in measured gestures, in the bridges it builds between people who perhaps shouldn't even be together. And perhaps the most silent invitation in the universe, disguised as loss, was precisely this: to look inward for the first time with the same dedication with which it has always looked outward. The person who left didn't take away your capacity to love, to mediate, to see beauty where others only see conflict. That remains your purpose, It's the most precious part of who you are. What they took, perhaps, was only the version of you that didn't yet know how to exist without bending. And that version honestly wasn't missed at all. Balance has never been about not swaying. It has always been about trusting that even after wavering, even after losing someone, even after the painful silence, you know how to return to the center. Not to the center of before, absent, extinguished. To a new center, but yours, more true. And it is to this center, with all the silent beauty that only those born under the sign of Libra carry, that this reflection now returns you.